Hold on to your butts.
Hang on, we're in for some chops.
You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
Welcome to the DeEducated podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of DeEducated. This is episode 3. My name is Chris.
I'm Mark. Come on! No?
You got your microphone out when you did that. So for half of it, you were just kind of going like a moron.
Oh, it was all full moron either way.
We are also joined by Dawn, who we are going to be talking to a little bit later and throughout the podcast. We have a fantastic interview coming up with Dawn, and I think everybody's going to enjoy it. But for now, he's going to be our peeping Tom in the show, and
Our peeping Dawn, if you will.
yeah, I knew you were going to do that.
You know that
I didn't
puns
see
are
Dawn
the
doing that. I didn't foresee that, so that's good news.
you know that puns are the greatest form of humor, right?
Says who?
I don't know. I read that somewhere.
Yeah, that's something that fathers tell themselves to make themselves feel better.
It's 100% true. Well, kids laugh at them, so you know what? If you can make your kid laugh, that's all that really matters.
Yeah, I know you've got a kid, but kids don't laugh at those.
That's true.
I understand you have to tell yourself that, but
they'll laugh at like anything, like literally a piece of paper just sitting on the floor, and they'll laugh. So
yeah, but at that stage, they also poop in their pants regularly.
Yeah, we're lucky we haven't had that in actually almost a year. So
Yeah, keep knocking on that wood.
Keep knocking.
Hey, let's talk about what we did this week. What did you do this week, Mark?
What did I do this week? Well, primarily I worked, of course, and got ready because I'm actually going on vacation next week. So I'm very much looking
First time
forward.
hearing of this. What are you going on vacation for?
Because I am tired, and it is time for a vacation. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to be Wednesday. I'm going to be at the range most of the day, if not the entire day. They may have to drag me kicking and screaming out of there. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I really just buried down and got myself in a position where I'm comfortable, leaving work. I think a lot of people are like that. You work and work and work, and then when you got to go on vacation, you work 10 times harder so that nothing goes wrong for those 5 days that you're going to be gone. And it's funny because you know that in real life, like it always happens no matter what. If you're gone, if you're there or not, your day would, things would blow up or they wouldn't. So it's just, you go crazy trying to prevent it from happening.
Better if you're the one there to clean up the mess.
It's true. Yeah, that's very true.
Even if you're actually the best person there to clean up the mess.
Sorry, what's that?
I said, even if you're not actually the best person to clean up the mess.
Yeah, unfortunately, I am the person that needs to clean up the mess. So, and then, of course, trained in Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, back hitting the weights now as well. So that's really good. Trying to just stay as lean as I possibly can. While, like I said, you can't out-train a bad diet, but God damn it, it's fun. So trying. So, eat food, lift weights, eat food, punchy, kind of my game plan. So we'll see how that goes.
Cool.
Yeah. And how about you? What did you end up doing this week?
I actually have no idea. Trying to remember. I had plans to work actually Wednesday night and Thursday night. We had plans to work on our trailer. I don't think I mentioned it. We've got it's a 1985 17-foot Bigfoot trailer, camper trailer. It's one of those two-piece clamshell fiberglass trailers.
Right.
The kind that are really worth keeping around and fixing up and renovating.
Yeah.
Well, we got one last year. We thought it would be okay. We'd get it by a couple of years before we really had to do much to it. And on its inaugural trip last year, the axle actually completely fell off. Or I should say the wheel fell off the axle.
The wheels came
damaged
off.
a little bit. Thankfully, it didn't destroy the fiberglass, so that was good. but we had to get a completely new axle put on it in the middle of Swift Current, Saskatchewan, because that was approximately where it got destroyed. We were on our way down into the Cypress Hills in southwestern Saskatchewan. And
Wait, there's hills in Saskatchewan?
what?
There's hills in Saskatchewan?
They're kind of inverted hills. They're actually like valleys and coulees. They just call them hills because, I don't know, somebody was standing on their head when they were naming it. I'm not sure. Yeah. Lots of history down there, though. It's where the Northwest Mounted Police were formed, or rather, it's their first outpost. You know, there was a very famous. Here's the thing: everybody calls the Nova Scotia killings lately the worst mass killing in Canadian history. Well, Don's like, nope. It's like,
hard no.
Not even close. You can talk, Don. It's okay. You don't have to mouth words. Wait, I can't hear you at all. Try and say something, Don.
Hard no.
Hard no. There we go. Okay, good. We can't hear. I thought your mic wasn't working for a second. I mean, the Cypress Hills massacre alone, that is the spark that caused MacDonald to form the Northwest Mounted Police. The official count is more than 30 men, women, and children, which that alone makes it a greater death count than the Nova Scotia massacre. But there's a lot of history down there, and I'm just completely sidetracking now, so I'll get back on track. We decided after the axle fell off, screw it, let's renovate the thing. So I've been in the middle of tearing it down, taking all the paneling down and all the insulation and all the cupboards, and I'm literally going right down to the fiberglass on the inside, and then we're going to rebuild it. I'm even taking the floor out and re-insulating the floor and the whole 9 yards. When I'm done, we should be able to camp in that thing in minus temperatures by the time I'm done.
Awesome.
But it's going to take a hell of a lot of work. And I probably should mention this. I have no idea what I'm doing.
See, that's the best part.
I've never done anything like this before. All of my other projects with woodworking or renovations or things of that nature have gone poorly.
Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't your wife build your deck? Yeah,
she built 2/3 of our deck. Yeah.
Right.
And the other third we contracted out and had some friends. We paid friends to build it.
Right.
Yeah. It's not that I'm an incapable person when it comes to that stuff. It's that I'm an impatient person. I don't really enjoy doing it. So I've never really done it enough to develop any skill with it. And, I'm going to be developing some skill with this. We'll see what happens. Because I can't fail on this, because Joe and I camp way too often for us not to have a trailer.
Yeah.
So, I'm diving in the deep end, but so far so good.
Yeah, I think I saw one.
So good. All I've done is demo so far.
Yeah, I saw one picture, and it was everything was just kind of disheveled, and then I'm like,
I can destroy the interior of a trailer pretty well so far. We also decided we don't want hot water in it too. So there's a hot water tank in it. So I'm going to take the hot water tank out to have more storage space, and I have no idea how to mess around with these solid copper gas pipes and stuff like this. So I think I may be bringing in some professional help in that regard.
Yeah.
We're also talking about moving the fridge from its current location to another, like further down along the same wall, which means we'd have to cut a new hole to exhaust the fridge in the fiberglass, and we'd have to fiberglass up the current hole in the wall. So, I mean, that's an interesting prospect too.
Yeah, you're going to lose a finger or a hand or a whole arm or something in the process.
No, that's not a concern. That's not a problem. I'm not incompetent with those sorts of things. The concern is that I'm going to get fed up and say that something is good enough. I shouldn't say that it's good enough.
Right. Put up a tarp. Good. Fuck it. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Tarp and duct tape instead of getting actual fiberglass work done on it.
Yeah, that's fair. Too funny.
So, I mean, this story is to tell you that I didn't actually get to do that because we were called into work on Wednesday night, and then my mother came into town on Thursday night, so we were hanging out with Mom last night. So I, other than work, I didn't do squat this week. I didn't make it out to the range. You know what? Last week, I did do Project Maple Seed. I was.
Right.
We haven't talked about this yet, so we might as well talk about it. So last Saturday, I was Project Maple Seed is a derivative of what's called Project Appleseed. It was started in the United States, and it's an organization that teaches basic rifleman skills to citizens. The idea being, if you're a hunter, or even if you're like a sport shooter, or frankly, if you just own a rifle, you should at least have the basic skills on how to use the thing. Because in the United States, unless you seek out the training yourself, there is no training. Even in Canada, you have your PAL or our PAL course, but it's entirely theoretical. It teaches you the basics of like certain types of malfunctions are, or how a gun theoretically works. Some courses will actually have you manipulate a firearm in a practical, but they don't teach you really how to use them, and how to use them properly, how to use them well. So Project Maple Seed came out of Project Appleseed, and that's what it teaches. And the cool thing about it is they basically just took the basic rifleman manual from the United States Army, from like circa World War I, World War II sort of stuff, and they just teach it to citizens now. So in some regards, it's kind of antiquated stuff. I mean, you're not doing any tactical training whatsoever, but you're getting really awesome, solid fundamentals on how to, basic marksmanship and rifleman skills on how to use a rifle properly and safely and accurately. So I've been training with them. This is my second year as an instructor in training with them. I took the course 3 years ago. And in order to become an instructor, you have to qualify as a rifleman in their program. So thankfully I was able to qualify the first year that I took it, because statistically in the United States, less than 10% of people qualify the first time that they take the course. And in Canada, so far, less than 20% of people qualify when they take the course. So Canada beats America. So, I mean, that's not a surprise to anybody. But less than 20% of people still qualify the first time they take the course, and I was able to qualify, so I take that as a point of pride. And so yeah, now this is the second year that I've been an instructor in training. Maybe they'll graduate me to full instructor at the end of this season. Maybe they won't. I don't know. But I taught one. Socially distanced rifle training is an interesting animal to see, because I mean, you can't get right down there in there with the person and show them how to do things. You have to describe it. It's a lot like teaching martial arts in that way. So it wasn't a whole lot different for me, but I was seeing some people that were struggling with the I want to just grab the person and move them in this way, but I can't do that. So other than that, it was a lot of fun. Project Maple Seed. I think it's mapleseedrifleman.com or projectmapleseed.com or something like that.
Just Google search it.
Just Google search Project Maple Seed.
Yeah.
It's a great course.
I have to say, I took it last year, and I've been shooting since I was 12 years old, and you get so much good stuff out of it. I unfortunately did not qualify. I personally blame my ripped pants for that, but it is.
I blame your Remington 597 with a Chinesium scope that doesn't even have a brand name label on it.
That's totally fair. And I only missed my first round by I think it was 4 or 5 points. So we'll call it a win then.
You're capable of qualifying. You'll qualify the next time you go out. For sure.
Yeah, because I'll actually have decent freaking gear with me, and my pants won't have ripped. But anyway,
that's my week.
It's very that's good, and it's very important that people have rifleman skills, and I love the fact that you're building your camper. Now the question becomes: do you think your camper will be able to survive the oncoming locust swarms that we're seeing around the world? So,
Mark.
Yeah, right. You like that? They're absolutely worst.
For our viewers at home, Mark just segued into the news.
Into the news.
We are now talking about the news.
Yeah. What locust? So, world news, there are now locust swarms because 2020 is drunk and it just needs to go the fuck home. There are now locust swarms all across the Middle East and now in Argentina.
But they're not in Canada.
They're not in Canada. They have been moving. Moving north, and the biggest issue isn't the fact that we're having locust swarms or us not having them. It's that they're attacking they're killing the crops in those areas, which puts more weight on our breadbasket here in Canada and specifically Saskatchewan, which is good for our farmers. But on the flip side, we're seeing freaking locust swarms all over the place. But
I'll tell you
for
this:
most of the
if coronavirus targeted specifically the firstborn of every household, now
Right.
with the locust swarms, like I was thinking, murder hornets were kind of going to be like we're just doing
The
like
thing.
a alternate universe end of days here.
Yeah,
But
clearly it's Revelations.
yeah, exactly.
Clearly, right?
But now we actually have locusts. We can't even substitute the murder hornets.
I know, and I think that's the funniest part. There's this really obscure website that I go to, not frequently, but every so often, and it's always like, I think it's like endapocalypse.org or some shit like that, and they're like, they list the 50 different things that are causing that the apocalypse are proof that the apocalypse is coming. And the locust thing, man, they're freaking out. Like all these crazy conspiracy theorists, they're off their rocker. Like these, died in the heart beforehand, but now they really have their evidence, right? So I think it's just.
So speaking of the first sign of the apocalypse, what's going on with COVID-19?
So there's a surge all throughout the United States. A lot of people know and have heard about the surge that's been happening. So basically, California, New York, Texas, and a few of the other southern states are having huge increases in their population, in their COVID cases. And it's funny because people are like, well, it's all these young people who are going to the bars and the beaches and the fact that we reopened. And I'm like, what happened 2 weeks ago? Let's just think about this for 1 second, where there were millions of people all congregating, some with masks and some without. Was the protest. The surge is coming from the protest. And right. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. It's that people made a choice at the time when oh my God, his name's when Floyd died and they wanted to do the protest. People made that choice of saying, am I going to go out in the street? Is this cause important enough for me to go out in the street and risk coronavirus or not? And they decided to go out. And this is the result. So that's okay. We just have to understand that was the reasoning for it. But now you're seeing the mainstream media spinning, it's the bars, it's kids, it's the young kids going to the beaches that are causing these spikes,
frankly,
all this
it's
sort of
probably
stuff.
all of the above. I mean, the United States has not been quarantined in any way, shape, or form since
for sure. I'm sure some of the reopening is causing it, but come on. You had a million friggin'
you got people
people
shoulder to shoulder, yelling, screaming, throwing things, fighting,
of course,
everything else. I mean,
right?
it was inevitable.
Yeah, and it was inevitable, and I think that's fundamentally what's annoying with this whole thing is now they're trying to spin it, right? Because there was no way that
Texas is talking about shutting down bars again and limiting restaurants again.
That's right, yeah, and LA has been fully locked down again, basically. So we're seeing I think it was even before the stuff that I sent this maybe an hour or two ago. I heard that they're in full lockdown. So it's definitely a problem. It's just we have to see what. Again, we're all about de-educating people, and you know what? There's a big spin that's going on around this surge, and people got to wake up to it. Speaking of spin,
speaking of spin, our firearms
update. Yeah.
So last week we talked about multiple lawsuits. The Order in Council on May 1st from the government has spurred a whole bunch of lawsuits for unconstitutionality. Is that a word? Unconstitutionation. Yeah, the unconstitutional nature of the OI Order in Council, the charter rights violations, and they're going all the way into the Bill of Rights and the whole 9 yards. Apparently, there's a couple things here. First of all, there's multiple suits, but really the big one on the block, the one that is going to raise the most ruckus and has the greatest chance at setting, real precedent in this country, is the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, the CCFR. And they are positioning their charter challenge not only for firearms, because you may or may not know, the way that our charter is written and our Bill of Rights and everything else, we don't really have property rights. We kind of had property rights under the British Bill of Rights, but we also had specific firearm rights under the British Bill of Rights, and those were all written out when the Canadian version of the Bill of Rights was being developed. And so that means that if the government decides, they can take your home, they can take your car, they can take your skidoo, they can take your laptop. You have no property rights. And if the government decides that they want to take your property, they can take your property in this country right now. I mean, I'm no lawyer, and apparently there's, precedent cases, here and there for specific types of property rights and that sort of thing. For example, just recently in BC, the Hells Angels won a 13-year-long court battle because they had several properties, as in like real estate properties, taken as the gains of what is it called?
Proceeds of a crime.
Proceeds of a crime. Thank you, Don. And it was found that because certain individuals who were members of the Hells Angels committed crimes does not mean that the Hells Angels committed crimes. And so you can't take their property because they couldn't prove that the Hells Angels as an organization committed the crimes, and they're the people who actually own the properties. So, I mean, there's things here and there, but really we don't have charter guaranteed rights to property in this country. So they've apparently positioned
corporations have property
lawsuit.
rights, but we don't.
What's that?
I said corporations have property rights, but individuals don't in this country.
So there you go. There's another example of how I'm not a lawyer, and I'd like, so take that for what it's worth.
I'm no lawyer either, but that's how I understand it.
I'm just repeating shit as I understand it too, right? So, they're positioning themselves for a charter challenge for property rights in general. I mean, they're specifically going after firearms in the OIC, and they're specifically also going after the RCMP for all of the changes that they've made to the firearms reference table that is arbitrarily, making property prohibited in Canada. But they are apparently positioning themselves to challenge the fact that there are no property rights in our charter. So that's kind of interesting, because that's something that, all Canadians should care about. I think that if the average Canadian found out that we don't actually have the right to own property in this country, I think most people would be surprised about that. So that's kind of, something to be aware of.
Do you know what kind of country doesn't let you have property rights? Communists. Just putting that out there.
Here's another thing that's interesting about it. So apparently there's the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, and then there's the Canadian Coalition for Gun Control. Because, if you're against gun owners, you just copy their name and put, I'm against you in it, and that's how it works. And this organization is, I don't know if she's the president or the CEO or whatever. It's headed, and their spokesperson is a lady named Wendy Cookier. Who I believe Wendy was still one of the victims of the Polytechnique shooting. I think it was the Polytechnique shooting. I don't quote me on that, but I think that she was shot in the Polytechnique shooting. Obviously, she survived, and she dedicated her life to eradicating the world of guns, which personally I think is incredibly misguided. I mean, I have empathy for the woman. She was shot by a madman, a misogynistic madman who is only there to shoot women. I mean, you have to have, some empathy for that. But that doesn't make you an expert on firearms. She spent the last, 30 years ago that happened, 31 years ago. So she spent about the last 30 years just trying to rid the world of guns instead of trying to rid the world of misogyny, and trying to rid the world of other types of crime. But that's what she's chosen to make her life's work. And she is apparently concerned enough, or her organization is concerned enough about the CCFR's challenge, their lawsuit, that she has applied, or the Canadian Coalition for Gun Control has applied for intervener status in their lawsuit. Which, as far as I understand it, I mean, put all the legalese aside, as far as I understand it, it allows them to position themselves as the sort of like a co-defendant, I guess, in that they get to put their 2 cents into the lawsuit,
Right,
and basically get to act as a co-accused without being a co-accused, I guess.
Right.
So I don't know exactly how these things work. I just know that it's called intervener status. I haven't had a chance to read about it. And if anybody else is interested in how that works, then you can read about it. But yeah, I mean, I guess this lawsuit is heating up. I mean, it's gone beyond firearms, and you know, anti-gun organizations are concerned up enough about it that they're trying to intervene in the thing. So, you know, more to come over the next couple of years, I guess. What else is going on in the news?
Yeah, so obviously there's lots happening in our country and around the world. And one of the things that just happened recently is that we've actually had our credit rating downgraded. Oh no, the entire place is going to burn to the ground now.
That's never happened before.
That's never
During a
happened
pandemic?
Before. During a pandemic, when the government is spending $250 billion. So basically what this means is that there's a couple of different rating agencies that exist. There's Moody's, and then this one is Finch Rating, and they so Finch Rating has downgraded Canada from AAA to AA plus. So what does that mean?
Terrible.
That's terrible. So essentially,
can we get a car loan with that rating?
No. You actually got to go to one of those car loans where they've got the thing. If you don't pay your bill, they just kill your. It's all LoJack. They just kill your starter. So basically, what it means is that obviously our government is spending a lot more money than they have recently, and they're a little bit worried about our ability to pay it back, but a very small amount. So basically, there's only 10 countries in the world that even
I got
have
news
AAA
for
rating.
Finch. They aren't the only ones who are worried about our ability to pay this back.
Don't worry, the citizens are really terrified too.
Yeah.
And then, so basically, with Finch Rating, we're now a AA plus, and that puts us in league with like the U.S., Austria, those sorts of countries. Hong Kong, right? You know, Hong Kong. Like one of the financial powerhouses, we're in line with them. Moody's and the other rating agencies have left us at AAA status. So this is much more of I think just a gesture. It's very symbolic.
Yeah.
It's just to show, hey guys, Canada is spending a lot of money, and to let people know. So
yeah.
I think it's time. You know, people have way overreacted to this, of course, as they usually do. But again, people don't understand numbers. They don't understand million, billion, trillion. They don't really fully grasp. You know, when somebody says, "Oh, we can't afford it because it costs $25 million," yeah, to the average person, we're like, "Okay, $25 million is a lot of money." That's nothing when we're talking about billions and trillions of dollars. You know, so everybody just needs to calm the hell down. We're fine. We're not gonna go anywhere. Canada is financially stable-ish. So, yeah. So speaking of stability,
talking about
what else
Canada,
is going on?
Yeah, talking about Canada. What's that?
You need to segue.
I don't segue. You know what?
You should
and
segue.
For our next point, hey, Canada lost the Security Council, the temporary Security Council bid. They lost to, what was it, Ireland and Norway?
Yeah, I think so.
Those dirty Nords. First of all, they take away our biggest moose trophy, and now they've taken our Security Council seat.
Maybe we just got to go to war with Norway.
It's time to invade Norway. You know what? Their people invaded Canada like centuries ago.
They were here. They tried to take Newfoundland from us, like in the year 1000. So,
and right? You know what? They didn't clean up after themselves either.
Yeah, they left their villages all over.
Leinster Meadow is where there's ruins there.
Yeah, exactly.
Clean up your crap, Norway.
Yeah, you've heard it on
Actually, I think that was like they came from where modern day Denmark is.
And it wasn't our land anyway. It was the First Nations land. I think it was the first place.
Doesn't really matter. The point is that you know, a lot of people. It depends on who you are, right? If you already agree with this current government, then everybody's like, "Oh darn! Oh geez, we tried our best," and it's not the end of the world. Not that big of a deal. You know, the other governments have tried this and failed too. It's our second failed bid. And then if you don't agree with this current government, you are screaming bloody murder about the incompetency of how Justin Trudeau has sold our future to the UN, and he couldn't even get a Security Council seat out of it. And he's just a failure as a human being, and we should all just, bury him in a ditch somewhere. And, I'm not completely opposed to that idea, but not for this reason.
I'm opposed to like that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of reasons that we didn't get the Security Council seat that have absolutely nothing to do with Justin Trudeau and have a lot to do with our not meeting a lot of criteria. So, but that happened anyway.
Fair enough.
What else is going on?
No
segue.
No segue? Oh, come on. I could have been like, people don't like Trudeau and there's an election coming. And you know where else there's an election coming? In the United States. And do you know who's in that election? Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And what's really fascinating right now is that Joe Biden, creepy Uncle Joe, creepy Uncle Joe is literally going gangbusters right now in the polls. Now, folks, the polls had Hillary Clinton to win against Donald Trump. Literally, Huffington Post had him winning 99%, or her winning 99% to 1%.
And he's doing the same thing now that he did then when he was losing in the polls back then. It
is a little different though, because he's usually controlling the narrative, and he's been quite absent. So the question is now becoming: is he doing this on purpose? Does he maybe not want to be president? Everything was all screwed up. Everything was on the upward swing for him. It's Donald Trump, right? Like, we have to remember who we're dealing with here. We're not dealing with somebody who actually got into public life for trying to help his fellow man. He got in because the Clintons basically dared him to. So, I think it's a fascinating thing, because we have seen it in the past where presidents have stepped away, or they've said, no, I'm not interested. Trump has just completely shit the bed on so many different areas of, he could have come out in support of BLM. You look at the way the Texas governor did it. You look at the way some of the other Republicans came out and said, what's happened is a tragedy. We need to support the protesters, and we need to get to the bottom of this and solve the problem with police brutality. Trump, he goes marching across freaking wherever there with the Bible in his hand, standing by the church, doubling down and trying to the evangelicals are going to vote for him. He doesn't need to try to solidify that vote, right? All he needs to do is is get active, and he's done nothing. He's 10 points behind in states like freaking Alabama and places that he should win without even a problem. And then in the swing states, he's getting just decimated right now in the polls. Again, they're just polls. We're still 4 months out, 5 months out, but maybe he just doesn't give a shit anymore.
Next election.
Yeah.
Good luck, America, with Joe Biden for the next.
Oh my God! Well, creepy Joe Biden. Right away, the very first thing he says is, or not right away, but one of the things he's been doing is he goes, well, we're going to mandate masks. Masks are going to be required in all public spaces in the United States. That's going to go over well.
Not in America,
that's what I'm saying, right?
Anyway,
it's absolutely going to be.
It's a dismal state of affairs for American candidates. Maybe
it really is.
We were talking with Kevin last week. Maybe this will spur someone to bring a third party into American politics,
which they could definitely use. I have no doubt about it. And like Kevin even mentioned, this might just be the end of the republic, but not the end of the United States. And other issues going on in the United States. Speaking of. Yeah. Is the American ban. So today the EU banned all American travel into Europe or into the EU proper. So essentially you'd have to fly into who's in the EU that's not Britain, basically, I think is not, and parts of Ireland and parts of Ukraine. The rest are in the EU basically. So as an American citizen, you can't fly directly into the EU. They banned them due to the COVID surge. They're saying that they don't want the U.S. or Americans bringing COVID back into Europe.
Can you still go to England because they Brexited?
Yeah. You would be able to go into anywhere that's not the EU. So it's just the EU that banned them. So it's kind of funny because I'm like, well, there's a lot of reasons you guys probably could have banned Americans. But yeah, sure, go with COVID. Obviously, this is this is on a geopolitical front. The fact that the EU would have the gumption to even ban travel from the United States, I think is speaking volumes about the descent of America as the the 800-pound. I shouldn't say the descent of the 800-pound gorilla, but they're really they're
Do you
clout.
really think so, though?
They're clout on a geopolitical sense, because if Europe is going to sit there and say, "Hey guys, you're out. We're banning your citizens," even in the case of a pandemic, I think that's just testing the waters, right? Now,
if a pandemic, this is just the most overreacted to pandemic. It's
right,
like it's everybody. Oh, this is an unprecedented situation. We're in an unprecedented time. I want to slap those people in the mouth when I hear them say that. But the reality is that this hasn't really happened before. And are they banning them because America is losing clout, or are they banning them because America has a lot of infections right now? And everybody's just like
they're using it,
reacting.
Yeah, I think they're reacting, but for them to even consider the ban, I think speaks volumes. Now
Brazil has been already did it. We've already done it.
We closed. That's fair, but. I don't know. I think this is kind of interesting. Now, if we see
Mexico needs to come out and say we've closed the borders. We're going to build a wall, and guess what? America's going to pay for it.
If they kick out the Americans out of Germany or out of any of the bases, or start shifting NATO, that would be an interesting move. And speaking of military, we actually have ourselves a military expert-ish kind of person.
We have a military veteran.
His
with
name
us. Is Don.
That's a nice segue.
Yeah, you like that, eh? I'm the segue master. He always gives me shit about my segues, but hey, man, I'm awesome.
Smooth.
I would have been like, that's it for news, and now for our next segment.
Yeah, but people don't like that. People want to be like lulled into it and come with us on this journey.
Different.
So, Mr. Don,
we are joined by Don. Don is a military veteran. Don is a current enforcement officer with what is the actual the proper name?
Animal Protection Services of Saskatchewan.
Animal Protection Services of Saskatchewan. So he's an Animal Protection Services officer. Is that the title?
It's an animal protection officer.
Yeah. Animal protection officer. Cool. So we kind of hit the two things. Why don't you tell us about the rest of yourself and introduce yourself?
So I'm the Executive Director of Animal Protection Services of Saskatchewan, but I retired from the military in 2003. So I've been out for a while now after almost 20 years service.
Excellent.
So we want to talk about, we want to pick your brain on both enforcement and on military. Let's start with military. And, as with all things, tell us what you're comfortable telling us and what you're not comfortable telling us. If we ask about it, just say it's none of your fucking business and move on. Why don't you tell us about a little bit about your time in the military and what you did in the military?
So I spent primarily most of my time with the 1st Battalion of Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, the Canadian Divisional Headquarters, and the Airborne Regiment. I was a signals operator and an infanteer, so my specialty was communications, and I ended up retiring out of the 1st Battalion as the battalion signals sergeant, so basically in charge of the platoon that operates all the communications for the battalion to be able to provide command and control to the infantry battalion.
So pretty important stuff, considering communication is important in war.
It's a pretty key element to command, for sure.
Communication and food basically are the two big things if you want to run an army.
Beans, bullets, and comms.
Comms, yeah. That's right. And so, one of the questions we wanted to ask you and find out is what was it that that drove you to join the military? Firstly, I think it's something that obviously not a lot of people wake up and be like, hey, I'm going to join the army. Was it a sense of duty? Did you just want to blow some shit up? What was the driving force for you?
I'm probably a little bit different than most. A lot of the people that I served with, they have sort of a family history or a family background, like, oh, my grandfather, my great grandfather, all of those. It wasn't like that. Quite honestly, my birthday's in September. I graduated early at 17 and had absolutely no desire to go back to school. And my dad was like, you got to find a job and do something. So literally it was, hey, the Army's looking for people. This is back in the early 80s, and it was an opportunity. And quite frankly, after going down the recruiting center, they're like, they had a program at that time because I was 17. It was called the Youth Training Employment Program. And so rather than being sort of stuck in a 3-year contract, it was 1 year, try it out. If it doesn't work for you, away you go. And so my dad actually had to sign me into the military, like, because I was underage. So
whatever gets you out of university, right?
Yeah, exactly. There was no plan there. So ended up leaving, and I said, I'll try for a couple of years and then, figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And I still haven't figured out what I want to be when I grow up. So
that's totally fair.
Yeah.
This animal protection gig will keep you occupied until you figure it out.
Exactly.
That's awesome. And now I understand, you're PPCLI, but you also did Airborne, is that correct? Or how did that work?
So within the Airborne Regiment, before it was disbanded, you have 3 commandos, 1, 2, and 3 commando. So 1 commando draws their people from all of what are the Vandus, so the different R22R regiments from the French-speaking. 2 commando is all from the Patricias. So at that time, Patricias were in Victoria, Calgary, and Winnipeg. And then, of course, the 3rd Battalion came from the Royal Canadian Regiment, all the infantry battalions. So you basically got, at certain points, you had some units that were sending their best people to the Airborne Regiment, and other units were sending their problem children to get rid of them. So
we kind of know from some of our history of what ended up happening there, right? So
yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah. So obviously, being Airborne and PPCLI, you got to do a lot of cool stuff, and one of the things I asked in some of the questions is, like, what would you say was kind of like the coolest thing you got to do? Because I think a lot of time people ask these questions of military folks of like, what was boot camp like and this and that. But like, what the hell did you get to blow up? Did you get to like grab a bazooka and shoot some shit? Like, what would you say was the coolest?
I'd thought about that question because obviously you'd provided me the questions, and I thought, what's the coolest? And I thought, from that perspective, the idea of on your machine gun course going out to the range using a 50 caliber machine gun with tracer rounds in it, and you get to explode a 50-gallon drum of gasoline on an old derelict vehicle. Pretty cool experience. Yeah. And then I thought, very cool, don't get me wrong, but probably the most cool, rewarding experience was I did a tour of Bosnia in 1995 when they were doing the war was still going on, and they were doing retaliatory airstrikes. We were doing all kinds of things to try and get them to adhere to the sanctions. Canadian soldiers were being taken hostage. I don't know if you recall that. And so at that time, there was a lot of, and that's why when you started talking about the UN, I was like, oh, don't get me started, because of restrictions on essentially what we were allowed to do. It created some animosity. Here you are as a soldier trained to protect people, and you're being hampered by the powers that be that you can't do those things. Right. So the coolest one was
with, Romeo Dallaire in Rwanda. You hear about the same sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, the rules of engagement when you're tasked to protect people, and then they give you a gun and all the weapons and tools to do that, but then say, no, you can't do that. to be able to protect those people creates a lot of frustration for a number of us. But the coolest thing was, well, cool in terms of humanitarian. At that time, families were fleeing and literally dropping off their children at hospitals, thinking that would be the safest place for them that time, because at least the Bosnian Serb army were not, destroying hospitals. Right. And so we had the opportunity to go to this hospital during our Sunday routine, and I didn't want to go. Yeah. That wasn't me. But Teddy Sheringham, one of the sergeants, was like, "Hey, you got to come in and do this." And I didn't know what we were doing. And what we ended up doing was, for about 2 hours, taking not only our minds off of being in a war zone, but those kids. And what we did was we played floor hockey with those kids. Awesome. And it was just absolutely amazing to be able to, share that experience. And I thought, yeah, if I think back on it, that is the coolest thing.
That's awesome, and that does lend itself to the idea of, the fact that a soldier can and should be out there protecting people, right? Like that's, I think that's a really important point that doesn't come across in a lot of cases.
I also like that you had a choice, blowing shit up is kind of cool, but, making a difference in some kids' lives for a day in a war-torn country, that trumps it any day of the week. So we always think, all of us who aren't in the military, we always think about the cool shit that you must get to play with and must get to blow up and all that sort of stuff. I don't think anybody actually thinks about, I don't think most people probably think about like the kind of shit that people think of, like, you see dead bodies and maybe you shoot someone, or maybe you see someone who's gotten blown up, or maybe you had to blow someone up. I don't think a lot of people think about the fact that you're also seeing, kids who had been dropped off at a hospital by their parents as they were fleeing because they thought they might not get killed there. It's an interesting thing to think about as a maybe something a part of being a soldier that a lot of people don't think about, who were never soldiers.
And it was actually strangely, it was a young student at Momentum that realized that primarily most of my memories that I have are of service things that are related to humanitarian things. Because he had asked me the question, "Oh, where were you?" And I explained, well, we were in Quebec during the ice storm, making sure that we restored power and had things in place for the people there. Like literally, the battalion, all of us were down there, and we were lumberjacks for 6 weeks. We were cutting wood and providing wood for the people, because they still had a lot of the communities have wood stoves. We were going from one small community in rural Quebec, just cutting trees, chopping wood for the entire time. Went to Winnipeg, filled sandbags so you couldn't lift your hands anymore.
During the Red River flood. I remember that very vividly. And I think that you're kind of proving something that we're trying to draw out with some of our questions is that you always hear about military folks being these big meatheads that are, they always vote Republican. They're always very conservative. All they care about is blowing shit up. And, what was your take, or what is your take on that mentality? Obviously, you have great memories of serving people and trying to protect people. So, your friends, your other troopers you were there with,
a lot. I mean, very similar. I mean, especially because the Patricias primarily draw from the Western Canada, and that's kind of their recruiting area. So, your typical Western boy and girl sort of thing. There are some conservative views. What was really good was discovering in the military that because there is such a wide range, both of language, diversity, and all of those things, you see it on the social media posts and everything, and people talk about not seeing color. We're clearly conscious of color, but one of the most important colors was green, and we all wore it. And I mean, to use the best example, we would, they would literally have to put 3 commando in between 1 commando and 2 commando at the men's Christmas dinner, because the Western boys would fight with the French Canadians. But if you got all of us as a group together, you can't mess with him. That's only we can we can joke about him and his French Canadianness, not you.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah.
That's
totally fair.
But I mean, the other thing, and I'd said it before to other people, is when you said meathead, I think of a different sort of term for it, but you're asking people to do a particular job to protect people by potentially ending other people's lives. And so there's some moral issues there. Mm-hmm. And at one point when I was in the Airborne, we were well aware that 50% of them, if they weren't in the Airborne Regiment, would be in prison. But you don't want choir boys going out and doing some of this difficult work, right? That's what you end up with.
And that really leads to the next question. Can you help us understand? Because obviously, like you say, you've got people in the military who are doing a very difficult line of work. Can you help us understand how important the military actually is for a country like Canada? Or not? But I think you would lean on the side that a military, you have to have it, right? And it is for the tree cutting, and it is for the sandbag filming. But there's also the larger actions that the Canadian military has performed through UN peacekeeping missions, which obviously you've alluded to. So can you help us kind of understand the importance of a military?
Well, having the military, although been traditionally defunded by virtually every government that's ever been in power, critically underfunded, understaffed. But having that key importance, the big thing is we still have a lot of weight throughout the military community just because of the tradition that's sort of been instilled since the First World War. Highly respected, and we may not have a lot of people, but everybody is well-trained and cross-trained. Like an example, communication specialist in the U.S. As a sergeant has one job. Whereas when he came up and did an exchange with us, we had privates that did his one job. And, you're kind of going, how do you guys get along and how do you manage? And when you realize they've got, 50 times the number of people that we have, you can see it. But the importance is there, especially when you're talking about NATO. Canada's been really keen on training the Partnership for Peace nations. So the nations that we're trying to get into NATO, seeing how we do the policies and procedures, how we operate, and being part of that collective group. And you alluded to it, so like the European Union is all sort of banding together, and we're keeping the States out for now, and having that NATO alliance and making sure that we're all playing nice and one happy family, because there are world powers out there that are continuing to get bigger, that are threats to everybody.
So that kind of leads us into this next question. And so for folks at home who don't know, NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and it actually comprises nations that don't even touch the North Atlantic anymore. But yeah, basically it's a military coalition who was basically set up after World War II to be a bulwark against Soviet and communist aggression. We have obligations as a member of NATO, and as you were just talking about, that's an important role. And do you think that we as a nation should be pushing harder to meet our obligations? Because as far as I understand, and I might be off on my numbers, but we're still not quite where we're supposed to be, because each nation is supposed to dedicate about 2% of its GDP to NATO, and I think we're at like 0.5 or maybe 0.7% of our GDP right now.
Yeah, and I think that falls onto our, and it doesn't matter what political party is in power. It's always been, again, underfunded because it doesn't fit into what everybody is looking at. Traditionally, as a country, we don't place the same value because we don't see a need for it. We've always had that umbrella protection from our neighbor to the south,
right? Yeah.
Or have a belief that neighbor to the south will protect us, and not take advantage of the fact that we have all the good water or lumber or oil.
Which is funny considering it wasn't all that long ago that we were constantly worried that the Americans were going to come up and annex our land.
Yeah. And so having increasing our spending and becoming part of that, and then we'll start to get those influential seats like on the UN Security Council and that. And until we step up, we like to have the Canadians be peacekeepers and do it, but we're not going to let them have a serious say in things because they're not really stepping up.
Right. Yeah. And I think that and you said it a few times about defunding our forces. I've heard it time and time again that our people who serve are underfunded. Look at our Navy, for example. Even we've got 12 ships that are supposed to
go back to Afghanistan and take a look at the fatigues that we were wearing.
Right.
Well, you were in the military when that happened, Don.
There were guys seriously that are wearing stuff from the Korean War. In the military. I'm sure, Don, you could speak to some of these things. Tell us a couple of those horror stories of you and defunding.
I went back to Brantford, and they have a war museum there. And in that war museum, we were just touring through because I always like to stop and see the different things. And we'd already stopped in Ottawa and gone to the National War Museum. Mm-hmm. And no word of a lie, in there was, and I know because the thing had smashed off the back of my head several times after parachute jumps, was the radio that I used to carry. And it's in the museum. But what was unique is in 1984, when I joined and then subsequently used that radio, it was already an antique because it had been used in the Korean War.
That's insane. We're asking you guys.
You're talking about that model of radio, or do you mean the actual radio that you carried?
No, the actual radio, the serial number.
The actual radio.
Yeah.
The actual radio.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy enough. Like the story is crazy enough when you say that, like the model of radio that I was using in the 80s, all the way up was used in the Korean War. But you actually found your radio in a museum in Brantford.
Yeah,
that is cool.
Even better, when I was competing with the small arms team with the 9mm pistol at the National Canadian Forces Small Arms Competition in Ottawa, one of the gun plumbers, we call him, the weapons tech, was looking at my one pistol, and he's like, "Where did you get that?" I'm like, "Well, it was issued to me." I mean, it had come right out of the packing grease, right? And was there. And so he contacted Browning. And this weapon had actually been put away and put in war stocks. And I was using for the first time, brand new in 1998, a weapon that had been packed away and made in 1941.
Wow. Was that those
and
you were shooting pistol competitions with a Browning high power.
Yeah.
Is that Browning where if you put your hand on it, it wouldn't fire? Like the safety on it was like...
Oh, yeah.
Those were safe. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Obviously, these were service pistol competitions. Was everybody using a high power?
Yep. Everybody was using a high power.
Wow.
Yeah.
That'll make you a good shot. Hey, I imagine if you can hit everything you're shooting at with a Browning high power, then put a race Glock in someone's hand and they'll be a world champion.
I look at some of the firearms now and I just go, wow, that's amazing. we were still using, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it was an SMG. It's the submachine gun. And literally we would, at 9mm, and put a 30-round clip in it, and we would use it for house clearing. And it wouldn't be when we actually would go in the door and turn left or right. You'd literally cock this thing because it was so unsafe that you'd cock it and you'd throw the entire weapon into the ground. And because of the way the breech block was, it'd hit and it would just start firing and keep going.
Yeah,
and of course, spin around, clear the house, and then you go in and retrieve the weapon.
Well, what kind of I don't actually know what SMGs the Canadian Army had. I know that, like, during World War II, we had bought some Thompsons from the U.S. and we had like Sterlings and stuff like that. But do you know which?
I'm trying to remember who made that SMG. I mean, I started back when we still had the FNC1, which was Fabrique Nationale, 7.62 rifle, which is now a prohibited gun. Yeah,
I would love to own one of those.
Fantastic weapon to shoot, tremendous. And then, of course, we had the general purpose machine gun, which now I guess is referred to as the C6, which isn't really a good machine gun because it's too accurate. It doesn't splay a lot of fire. It's too accurate. So
right. Yeah, well, and even, you're seeing with the change from the M16 to the M4, in the U.S., they ran it the same thing. It's really a battle rifle now, and that's what they were going for. So obviously funding is definitely an issue in the Canadian Forces. It's kind of the issue, I think, that stems or any of the other issues that we have. So if you could change something in the military today, like you were like, all right, Prime Minister Don, make it happen. What do you think would be the one thing you would want to change?
Minister of National Defense for a day.
Yeah.
Ooh. I get to be Minister of National Defense for a day.
Yeah.
5-star general or whatever. Just take your pick.
Find a way to convince, because at that point you're a politician anyway. Convince the other politicians that we've got to change the procurement process.
Right.
The procurement process and how equipment is. I mean, this goes back to when we were in the Airborne Regiment. Guys knew that there was much better kit out there. So, you'd go to Mount Equipment Co-op and get the latest and greatest Gore-Tex stuff in green and wear that instead of the stuff that you were issued. And now that's finally there, but it took so long to get that equipment, purchase of the new jets. How many times have we got back and forth with that? And it's the procurement process. There's money sitting there and it's not getting spent for buying beans and bullets for the troops.
Right. And I think that's tragic. Like, I don't think people really realize that troopers are buying their own goddamn gear. Even today.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, there's guys' boots, all sorts of gear that families. So we're asking families in this country, I'm going to get on a soapbox for a second, but we're asking families who are sending their loved ones over to fight and defend our country to spend their own hard-earned money on buying boots and kit and fucking rucksacks and you name it, and shipping it over to our own soldiers because the stuff that we're giving them is crap. And it's all because it's being dragged down through these weird government policies and these weird procurement programs, and I don't think Canadians truly understand that we're asking people to go into harm's way, and then we're saying, like, here you go, good luck. It's from 1954, and it was shot by a freaking invading communist in fucking North Korea. Like, it's absolutely asinine, So, sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent, but I think it's just it's sick.
No, you're not wrong. I mean, you think back even as early or late, depending on your point of view. Troops are deploying to Afghanistan with the new CAD-PAT camouflage pattern.
Yeah.
But it's in green. You're in a desert. Who didn't think that we needed to buy tans to head off to a desert?
Right.
And why is it taking so long?
Right. And it took years before every soldier was kitted out. Like it's absolutely fucking ridiculous. And so obviously there's lots of changes that we need, but as you say, that I think the procurement is one of them. And so Don, one of the ways we know you is through jiu-jitsu training. You've recently joined us on the mats for a little bit of practicing murder or murder yoga or whatever funny name you like to give jiu-jitsu. So I want to kind of get your perspective because you've gone through close quarter combat training, obviously in the military. Has jiu-jitsu changed your perspective on military's close quarter combat training? I know you and I have had discussions offline about kind of some of these things. So tell us, like, has it helped or changed or?
It's definitely helped, and it's certainly changed. It's really changed my perspective in terms of my law enforcement job. Very much so. And again, sometimes the military is not the quickest to adapt to things. I think I don't know if you recall the movie about the Devil's Brigade, where you've got the Sergeant Canadian teaching the troops.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed a whole lot from that, to be quite honest. I mean, individuals that have been involved in combat sports have brought those things to individual units, but as a whole, the training program, not a lot of changes. Same way that there's not been a lot of changes to the law enforcement one, where you're teaching PPCT when, we see the outcry and some of the police tactics and what people are doing or not doing. And certainly the benefits of jiu-jitsu, I think actually, didn't Professor Pat start a program with his academy that literally any law enforcement officer that joins will be trained for free up until blue belt?
Several Team Henzo Gracie, like students of Henzo Gracie's who now have their own academies throughout the United States have started that program recently, that anyone in law enforcement can train at their academy for free up to the point where they reach blue belt.
Like that's awesome. Sorry. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, no, I think that's tremendous, because you teach someone, these control tactics in a 40-hour course, and then, you're qualified. And then the next time you might use it is when you recertify the next year. Yeah. But when it comes time to actually use it, the idea of using a pressure point is once someone complies, you release that so that they've done what you wanted. And a lot of the times you see, clearly in some of the videos that have been shown that, well, if I was to put a pressure point on you and I'm giving you pain and then you do what I tell you, but that's not released, are you going to resist and struggle? I'm betting so. And the other point in terms of that,
it works on like, it may work on me, but it may not work on me.
Yeah,
exactly. And the other one is being a little bit, speaking from my perspective only, I don't think the public really has a complete understanding. Like, even with everything that I know, for me to either take Chris or yourself, Mark, and try and get you, when you're resisting, to secure an arm, put a silver bracelet on it, and then while doing that, get another arm behind your back and secure it with a silver bracelet. With the training and size that you both have, there's not a chance that I'm ever going to accomplish that.
Yeah, I fundamentally agree, and I think that's that's where to your point, people don't really get exactly what that interaction is like, right?
Compare that even just to sport jiu-jitsu. Imagine you're just doing a 2-minute drill. Let's say you're in cross-eyed, knee on belly, mount. It doesn't matter what position you're starting in, but you're saying the only thing you can do to this person is Kimura them.
Yeah,
right.
Like, you have to do a Kimura. Like it's the same thing. Like, maybe a Kimura is going to be there, maybe a Kimura is not going to be there. And there are some some of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in the world. You get them against another black belt and you tell them you can only Kimura this black belt. Is it going to happen 9 times out of 10, or even 1 time out of 10? Or are they going to have to take something else that's available to them? Like, making somebody do something that physically make them do something that they don't want to do It's not always the easiest thing in the world, whether they're trained or whether they're not trained.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. Like when we're training in jiu-jitsu, we're trying to stop another person from doing something, choking us, putting us in a lock, whatever it is. We're trying to stop that person, and it's tough to do, right? Now, you get that person hopped up on meth, they're pissed off, they're angry, and you have a person who has not trained at all in a year.
Mm-hmm. You put them under pressure, you're setting them up for failure.
You are.
Sure.
You unequivocally are. I talk about this I think in a couple episodes and my blog and whatnot, but it's the whole idea of like the reason a guy can get in a ring with a boxer, or a boxer can get in the ring, and another human being who is also trained can throw a fist at that boxer, and that boxer is able to slip, roll, right, cover, block, parry, counter, strike, all of that is because he's had that fist thrown in his face 10,000 times, right? And so he doesn't react. He doesn't like have a full adrenaline dump, And I think what ends up happening,
give him 6 months or a year off, and he might flinch.
And he might flinch.
In the sports, they call that ring rust.
They call it ring rust.
But what it really is that it's a perishable skill. It has to be practiced regularly, or
it has to be.
Perishes.
It has to be, yeah. And I think I mentioned this before. You look at like firefighters. They're continuously training with their gear. The EMTs are continuously training with their gear. They're always up a freaking ladder, down a ladder. They've got their packs on. They're constantly moving stuff. And then we see in our law enforcement, we say, here's your gun, here's your badge, here's your 40 hours once a year. And we're saying, no, the people aren't going to be able to hurt you. You're not going to be able to defend you, or you're going to be able to defend yourself. And this leads itself down the path of like, you get guys, you get some of these cops who are like, they maybe have an altercation once a month, maybe, or whatever it is, or once every 2 weeks, or whatever it is. And it doesn't work, and their stuff doesn't work. So that's why they come as hard as they can, as fast as they can. And we all know from training in jiu-jitsu, yeah, they're just putting themselves in danger. We all know from jiu-jitsu, we get that guy on the mat. It's his first day on the mats, right? His name is Don. No.
Yeah.
No, but you get that guy, the first day on the mat, right? We've all had that encounter with the guy. And he's just tense, and he's like barreling at you, and he's trying to, right? And this guy, we're able to sidestep, move, and do what we need to do, on the mat with him. And so it's that natural human reaction. I always say, human beings evolved to hunt gazelles on the plains of Africa. We did not evolve to like be able to, manipulate each other. So the second, physically, so the second a person has a physical altercation, the Neanderthal brain kicks in, and they're like, ah, and they're running and trying to defend themselves. And I think that's what happens with cops, because they have to fall back on that base human instinct to smash now, right? Because that's what we've got.
We're talking about close combat. That ties in, and we're talking about your job in law enforcement.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's talk about the use of force. I mean, there's been a hot button topic in the news lately, the use of force and how it works. So, like, why don't you maybe just give us the cliff notes real quick on what the use of force is, and really your take on use of force today.
So we get trained. So you have to recertify every year on the use of force, and remembering that it's a moving target. There is one, but every time case law or something happens or somebody does something inappropriate, it changes that whole use of force model. So now what was acceptable for someone who was actively resisting with a weapon, well, now this year we can't use that soft technique. And then moving to you've got to try something different, or now you've got to use a hard technique. And it's a continually moving, living, breathing thing. And I guess the biggest one in terms of my take on the use of force is we're still sending people to welfare checks and all of these different calls and expecting miracles to happen. I can use an example that existed today. There was a potential mental health issue and contacted Mobile Crisis, and they went, oh, well, that's a different part of rural Saskatchewan. We don't have anybody there. You'll have to call the RCMP. Well, that RCMP detachment, probably that young constable, may have had some experience and may not, but not a mental health professional. And now you're asking them to go out and de-escalate something. And quite frankly, I don't know about you, I still get that way. Not that I've done anything wrong, but the minute that a cop rolls up on me for whatever reason, my first reaction is, what did I do wrong, and get tense. Well, now you've got somebody that's got a mental health issue. It usually, even with us, we take the RCMP with us when we're dealing with an animal issue where we might have to remove somebody's animals from them, because we know the minute you tell someone that you are going to take their property and their livelihood, this is when it's going to escalate and kick off.
Even though they don't have the right to that property according to our charter.
Exactly. So now it goes one of two ways. Either they're good and compliant and understand what you're there for, or it doesn't. And there's no real middle ground, because at that point, under our Mental Health Act, you've got to take them into custody for an assessment. Well, that's never good.
Well,
and for everybody's
an absolute, unfortunately, I have some experience in the.
I was going to say, because Joe's background with, I imagine she's had some work with social working.
I have a family member with, I won't get into it because this is out around the world, but I have a family member with mental health experience, to put it that way.
Yeah. And can you imagine, they're already in an agitated state, and now you're forcing them to do something or go with somebody that they don't want to go with. Mm-hmm. I just think about particularly that one in Toronto where the young lady ended up falling, the 23 floors and what it is, when it was a welfare check. And I mean, we can all probably draw some conclusions there as to how that happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's scary. Yeah. And we see it more frequently than we need to, you can look online for tens of, hundreds of these stories of, mom calls the police because her son is having X, Y, or Z issue, freaking out. She calls the police because she needs help, and they kill their own kid. Like, this happens more times than we care to admit, and a lot of this is because, again, we're taking people who are good, for the most part, are well intentioned, but we have just not trained them. It's just that simple, right?
Now we're talking about reducing their funding.
And then we want to reduce their funding. We want to reduce their training, because, again, it's this fundamental thing about violence. And I think this is kind of one of the crux with our podcast is people are afraid of violence. They're afraid of what violence is, and they don't truly understand it. And when you understand that violence is part of the human condition, and that you can use it in a positive way to, control somebody, so long as you're training, so long as you're doing it regularly, that it can actually benefit humanity. We can help somebody we can help that mom who does have a son who is mentally ill, who does have, X, Y, or Z problems. We can help if we actually have people in place who, what if you had a social worker who was trained in jiu-jitsu regularly, that was in that situation? She or he could actually help, I
remember just recently seeing I forget which police department it was. I was just watching YouTube videos, and it just happened to pop up on this YouTube video. And it was, the jiu-jitsu community loves to point out when jiu-jitsu wins. For sure. And so this is an example of that. And it's a particular police officer, they reported him as a purple belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I know I can't, confirm nor deny the accuracy of that. But basically there's this fight going on. there's 3 police officers, and it looks to be 5 or 6, maybe even 7 people that are basically fighting with these cops. And so 2 of the officers are trying to subdue one person, and the one officer with the purple belt basically single-handedly subdues 2 of them at once, because he was able to put one down and get on top of him. And then when the other guy tried to attack him when he was on top of that guy, he put that guy down too, and was able to hold 2 people down, and even had one handcuff on one of the guy's arms before one of the other 2 officers, or I guess probably backup or whatever, it's hard to tell. These videos never have context on YouTube, but
Of course,
whoever, before another officer could show up and take one of them off his hands so that he could handcuff the other hand of the first one. You contrast that to the video. I don't know if you guys saw this, but the footage of the person who was attacking a female police officer in Toronto about a month and a half ago, and throwing a piece of broken concrete at her patrol vehicle. And he smashes out the back window, and he throws it multiple times against the vehicle. And then he starts throwing this concrete brick at her. And she has no idea. She's backpedaling and trying to run away from the guy, and she can't even run away from him, and he's able to catch up to her and throws it at her and just barely misses her, and just physically speaking, completely incapable of dealing with that situation. Now, it's not because women are incapable of dealing with that. It's because that particular officer clearly had done nothing other than the minimum required physical training or combat training for their job.
For sure. Well, and I think that this kind of lends itself, and you made the comment about, how people in jiu-jitsu love to tout, when jiu-jitsu wins, right? And man, let's be honest, you do a berimbolo, you're going to get punched in the mouth, right? Like out on the street. But the reality is that even just having that constant physical contact helps burn out your nervous system, so that when you are in that altercation, when the guy's throwing the concrete at you, condition. When
burnt out nervous systems.
Fair enough. I just burn it out. You don't need it. Your nervous system's stupid anyway. It doesn't work. Yeah. So, but if you can condition the person's nervous system so that they know what it's like to have people arms around them and close quarters and all this sort of stuff, they'll actually be able to think, right? Like Don, we always tell you, eventually you'll be able to think when you're on the mats and you're breathing and all that, and you're already starting to see it, right? And as time progresses, you start to be able to see more and more and more. And so if we can take these folks and actually put them in a sparring situation regularly, that when they're in an active fight for their life, they'll actually be able to think. They'll actually be able to breathe for a second and go, "Oh shit, what is going on?" Right? But this is why they default to gun, or this is why they default to taser or pepper spray, because that's what they've trained in the most. So
Don, I want to leave the last word to you on this, unless you're about to say something.
The only what's interesting is, in terms of the use of force training, is you're trained on the very beginning piece, so the de-escalation and the verbal judo, and the deadly force one, because those are the ones that, the deadly force one, you need to have that obviously because you're using deadly force.
For sure.
A lot of training there. And then you've got the de-escalation, and, your mouth is your biggest weapon in trying to de-escalate things and trying not to re-incite people. It's the middle ground stuff where you're actually physically hands-on to then using, your intermediate weapons like OC spray or the baton. That, it's, a small, tiny portion of the 40-hour course. And those are the ones that we should be spending a lot more time on, because especially when it comes to, okay, now you've got to get hands-on and control somebody. I mean, that's about 4 hours. Do you think, how would you do after 4 hours of jiu-jitsu training to control somebody?
4 classes.
That's 4 classes. Nothing.
After 4 classes, 99.9% of people are still forgetting to breathe.
Yeah. Well, people don't know. You can't do a basic shrimp.
So now you're sending people out on the street like that.
Yeah.
So would you wager that the majority of, let's call them conflicts in law enforcement, would you say that the majority of them in terms of continuum, really would fall in that gray area where people are least trained?
Most definitely.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yep.
I completely understand the training in the beginning and the end, because at the beginning, if you can avoid a physical confrontation, well, there's definitely value to that. And at the end, I mean, if somebody forces the issue and you need to, for example, use your sidearm or whatever, you have to be competent in that, because you can't be, you're shooting kids through walls or shooting bystanders. I mean, that all makes absolute sense. So the answer isn't even a shift in where the focus is. It sounds like the answer is there just has to be more training so that there's time to get that gray area stuff in there. If I'm reading you right.
Most definitely. Yep. Needs that gray area to have more time spent on it, because if you spend a bunch of time at the beginning and a bunch of time at the end and not to the middle, can you see where the default becomes, I'm pulling my firearm?
Yeah, you go firearm, right?
Because I'm not confident in those ones in the middle.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. I think that's just it.
100%.
So obviously, I always have a weird question that I like to ask, and it drives Chris crazy, but I don't care. So my final question is, what would you rather fight, 1,000 1-pound horses or one 1,000-pound horse? Go.
Easy answer. Okay. Easy. It's got to be the 1,000-pound horse, because I know what's coming.
Yeah.
It's always those little guys that are so fast and everything else that you're hit like 50 or 60 times before you even know what's happening. So 1,000 of them would be just too much. At least with a 1,000-pound horse, I know it was coming.
Right, but when they come in kind of waves, like.
So in terms of an apocalypse.
Yes.
You're kind of you're hoping for Godzilla over zombie invasion.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah.
That's totally fair.
It's nice to see I'm not the only one who doesn't turn his phone off during
You guys, shut your damn phones off. So that basically concludes our interview, Don. We really appreciate you coming out. Giving us a lot of insight into the military, into law enforcement.
I love talking to people both in military and in law enforcement, because I've obviously never been involved in either, but as a civilian, I've been involved in so many aspects circulating around violence. Like I've been in martial arts since I was 5. I grew up in a house with a dad who, prior to having kids, shot competitive handgun, and now I'm big into firearms. So like my life is all about violence, but somehow I missed the boat on signing up for the military or becoming a police officer. So I always find it very, very interesting talking to people who went that path in their lives. And I think there are a few I know I just realized I completely cut Mark off, but that's what I do. I think that there are a few professions in the world that are as noble as those pursuits, and I think it is a travesty that those pursuits get shit on so frequently in our society. So I'm going to echo Mark and say thank you, and thank you for your service as a veteran. And I'm glad that there's guys like you that are out there looking out for the welfare of animals.
Absolutely.
No, I appreciate that. And it's one of those things that I know that a lot of my brothers and sisters in the military have struggled with, because nobody appreciates a soldier until the enemy's knocking at the door.
Right? Isn't that true? It's the rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war, right? So
exactly.
Excellent.
And
so
we'd like to think that we know real violence, but the reality is we've never had to fight for our lives.
Yeah.
And there's always a referee in the ring with us.
Yep. So true. So speaking of where I need a referee, let's go on to our next segment. It's called "Get Off My Lawn."
That's not even a segue.
Dude, you leave my segues alone.
What do you need a referee for this segment for?
Because I need somebody to calm me down, because I'm going to talk about Ashley Furniture, who fucking sucks.
Well, then Ashley Furniture needs the referee, not
you. Yeah, that's true. Well, I need the referee to calm me down. So we have a segment called "Get Off My Lawn." This is where Chris and I fucking rant and rave about.
There's a new segment too. We waited until episode 3 for this segment.
Yeah, so basically we're going to rant and rave about either corporations that piss us off, things that piss us off, just generalities about
Sometimes
pissing us
just
off.
people.
Sometimes people. I'll just say people. For example, sometimes teenagers. I just fucking hate them. No. So. And I can't put communists in here because, that's just general loathing.
You should probably start ragging on Ashley Furniture before you have 15 things for your segment.
That's totally fair. So Ashley Furniture, I want you to listen up real good. Go fuck yourself, Ashley Furniture. That's what I have to say. And the main reason is
we're so getting sued. We're not even making any money off it.
Hey, look, this is my personal opinion. All right. Ashley Furniture can disagree with me all they like. So in a nutshell, on their website, I ordered some product. If I ordered it before a certain date, it would arrive within 5 to 7 days after that time period. Then they went and used COVID as an excuse for my items not arriving. Now, if it had been March 19th and they're like, oh, COVID, we're fucked, I would have been like, fair, right? This is at the end of May when they're like, oh, COVID, it's causing us problems. You've had 3 months to get your shit together. I was going to say Canada Post. That's a whole nother one. Ashley Furniture. And yet we had to sit for weeks and weeks and weeks with no furniture in the house. Well, we had the stuff behind me, but my entire house was basically bare because we had no furniture. And Ashley Furniture's answer was, oops, sorry, our bad. And then we finally get the fucking furniture. And they drop it off at the front of my house. And they're like, good luck. And I had to literally caber toss my couch, like, where you're rolling a fucking long ways. I had to roll my couch.
They don't roll them. In the caber toss, they throw them. That's why.
Well, or not, but the caber turn, whatever you want to call it. And I literally am in my fucking, outside my house, moving it because it wouldn't fit through my front door by myself. I love my wife, but she can't lift the couch. So I freaking have to caber toss this goddamn couch. Well, it was in the middle of the afternoon. Well, that night I wasn't going to call you. And I get the damn thing into the house, lift it up, and shoved through the door to start off. So then I'm pissed off, call Ashley Furniture, like, what the fuck is going on here? This is what they call their delivery service, right?
Because of COVID-19, the new protocol, they won't come in.
No!
They didn't even use that excuse?
No, that was just, this is their delivery service. Yeah, I could have paid them hundreds of dollars to have a guy come in and set it up and do all that shit if I had but known, right? So then I called them. I pissed off about all this shit, the delay, and guess what they offered me? Are you sitting down? This is what they fucking offered me as a gift certificate. Okay, gift certificate, $50 to Ashley Furniture. Ashley Furniture. Look at me when I tell you this. Take your $50 gift card and shove it straight up your ass.
I'm sure somebody from Ashley Furniture is watching this.
They will never sponsor this show, and I don't even give a shit. So Ashley Furniture,
I'm calling Ashley Furniture tomorrow and ask them if they want to sponsor a new podcast.
No, dude. So I put a 1-star rating, a Google rating on their Google rating.
Oh boy!
And they called me and asked me. After they explained the situation, even though I talked to somebody like for an hour before that, the day before, they called me, and after they explained the situation to me a second or third or 50th fucking time, or their excuses, they asked me to change my fucking rating. They asked me to change my fucking Google rating. They said, well, now that you understand, would you give us a higher rating? So they got a 4.6 Google rating because they call people and go, hey, motherfucker, will you change your rating? So they got somebody dedicated. They can dedicate somebody to friggin' fuck around on Google all day long, but they can't dedicate somebody to build me my fucking couch and bring it to my house? Insane.
So generally, as a small business owner, I do not condone leaving Google ratings. I think it is a shitty system. But I also know
for major corporations, fuck them. No, fuck them. Major corporations.
I also know some more of the background of this and what you've been going through over the last several months. So in this particular case, I will condone it, but I don't want the karma of the bad Google review on my conscience.
That's fair.
Is it my turn now?
Your turn, please.
Okay, so
who should get the fuck off your lawn, Chris?
Well, I had one, but now it's another company, and now I don't want to say them. I just don't want to bring bad karma down on
you can rhyme the name and call them, say,
Here I can change it on the fly. Here's my get off my lawn. People who claim to the world that they are the independent thinkers, that they are the critical thinkers, that they are the intelligent ones in the world, and you should listen to them because they know what they're talking about. But then they go around and they give half-truth and misinformation and poorly vetted information out to people and try to tell them that they're wrong and shame them in front of other people. And here's my example. I'm not going to use names because this person is in my close circle. And so I'm just not going to use names. Here's what happens. Person A makes a comment about Sweden and how Sweden throughout this whole thing of COVID has left their schools open. And leaving their schools open has turned out not to be such a bad decision because there were no major outbreaks in schools. There were no major problems in schools. You know, maybe we could have done the same thing here. Maybe that's a lesson to be learned because of the experiment that Sweden did. Person B then tells them, no, you're absolutely wrong. Sweden's experiment was an absolute failure, and you shouldn't spread that around. You should find out what you're talking about before you start spreading things like that around, because even the chief medical health officer of Sweden has said that what they did was a mistake. And so then person A is telling me this, and I said, pardon? When did the chief medical health officer come out and say that their response was a mistake? And I'm like, the last I heard from the chief medical health officer of Sweden was the late May, and I'll admit that fully. It's been almost a month since I paid attention to Sweden. But at that time, the last time I checked up on Sweden, the chief medical health officer was flat out saying, it appears as though the decision that we made was the right decision, and we're going to continue with that course of action. So now all of a sudden in a 3-week span, it's apparently this big mistake. And now that person A has been admonished by person B, the intellectual, because Sweden left schools open and they think that was a good decision. So I have to look this up, of course, because if the chief medical health officer for Sweden has pulled a 180, I want to know about it. So I look it up, and I'm reading the actual interview and with actual quotes from the chief medical health officer, and
rather than just the headline.
What's that?
Rather than just the headline.
Rather than just the headline. And when I do the Google search, first of all, there are the first 2 articles that come up. The number 1 article in Google when I do the search is NPR. Okay, and I'm not going to say that they're fake news. I'm going to say that they are a leftist news organization, and
yeah, they are.
Leftist news organizations have a place. Okay, I listen to the CBC every day. The first thing I do every morning is I tell Google Home to play me CBC News.
And it says, yes, comrade, I will.
I also have it play all of the other news stations.
Right.
One of my early blogs, I said that I have an interesting mix of where I get my information from that both confirms my biases and pisses me off every single day.
Agreed.
So NPR was number 1. Number 2 was CNBC or C. It was an American news organization that's not necessarily a leftist news organization. But the first one's NPR. NPR's news article says, Chief Medical Health Officer of Sweden says they regret all of the deaths in Sweden. Second one says, Chief Medical Health Officer in Sweden, something to the effect of gives update on current affairs or current state of affairs in Sweden. So I read the NPR article. I got about 3 sentences into it before I had to just turn it off for my own sanity. And it was all about how Sweden did the wrong thing. And all the people who told Sweden that they were doing the wrong thing have been vindicated, because even the chief medical health officer has said that they regret their decisions and all the people that have died. Then I read the next news article that has all of the actual quotes of what he actually said. And lo and behold, the chief medical health officer said that they learned a number of lessons from what they did, and they did a lot of things right, and they would do them again. And I'm paraphrasing here. They also learned a lot of things that they did wrong. And one of the things that they did wrong was that they reacted too slowly in regards to care homes, nursing homes, and
Right.
elderly living spaces.
Yeah.
And that they would do that differently.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, given the information that they had, he quote, and again, I'm going to paraphrase quote here, so I shouldn't say quote, but he says that he doesn't see, given the information that they had at the time, how they could have made any other decision than what they made. Basically means we made the right call with the information that we had, and it was the right call. And then he goes on to say, it is regrettable the number of people who have died during this pandemic. That is not the same as saying, I regret our decisions and I regret all of the deaths that I have caused based on our decisions. He is saying it is regrettable. The situation is regrettable. It is not the same fucking thing. So, moral of the story here, if you want to call yourself an educated person and a moral authority on anything, or, a critical thinker, or if you want to disparage other people and tell them that they're wrong, you need to get your fucking facts straight, and you need to confirm your news sources with news sources that don't agree with you before you start spouting them off, because you can have both sides of the story, and as usual, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Or you need to do more than just read NPR's headlines. And so those people who call themselves critical thinkers, I'm going to call them fake critical thinkers. You can get off my lawn. Boom.
Beautiful.
Right off the top of my head.
God, yes. So, Ashley Furniture, fake critical thinkers, get the fuck off our lawns. Yeah. Boom. So,
and Don's like, I really need to stick around for this.
God damn it.
No, that's good.
All I hear is these guys fucking bitching. And so, but because we want people to get the fuck off our lawn, we also want to shout out some folks who are really, right? Yeah, it's not all bad, right?
Do I have to go first this time?
Take the good and the bad. You go first. For sure.
Okay, I'll go first. So my shout out this week is to everyone who makes the world work and gets underappreciated. From the plumbers who get shit on every day, the animal services officers who get bitten by animals and abused by owners, and the oil workers who are told that they're killing the planet by people driving Volkswagens. I'm giving you a shout out today because you are underappreciated and it is fucking stupid. And we need to appreciate the people who make the world go round. And as Mike Rowe is famous for saying, I'm just going to give the sentiment, not a quote. Mike Rowe knows that you're the people that make civilized life possible for the rest of us. So awesome. You get my shout out this week.
Excellent. And my shout out this week is to all the men and women who serve every single day and protect us from actual threats. People forget that there are legitimate threats to our way of life, and not just talking about Western homogeny, but that there are people in this world who think that liberal principles like women being allowed to work and vote is abhorrent. There are folks that think that nation states should be wiped out and that we should live along sectarian lines. There are people who feel that freedom is not something that people should have, and that there should be those who tell everyone else how to think, love, and live. And to those people who try and stop these other people every single day and who wear a uniform and defend this beautiful country, I want to say thank you. And I'm sure Chris has that same sentiment. Thank you to everyone who serves.
No, I have the opposite of that. I have contempt for people who make life safe.
So thank you all very, very much who serve. And Don, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it, guys.
Maybe we'll take a look at bringing you back some other day too, because I think we need more people like you who have had real life experiences. You know, talking to other people about, and I'm sure that a lot of times those conversations are hard, but I think that it's so hidden from the average person. And I think if the average person had a better understanding of what people like you do and the two careers that you've had do every day, I think we would have a better understanding for those jobs to begin with. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing with us. And that's pretty much going to do it for episode 3. We've made it through 3 of these things. Here's to 300 more. If you would like to connect with us, first of all, you can download this audio version of this podcast anywhere that podcasts are found. You can just give us a search. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/DeEducated. You can find us on Patreon if you would like to help support us. Once we have a little bit of money with this thing, we can start doing crazy things with that money for your entertainment. So if you would like to support us, if you like what you've been hearing so far and you'd like to continue hearing it, you can go to patreon.com/DeEducated, and it's simple stuff, right? I mean, you can donate as little as your morning cup of coffee, all the way up to $10,000 an hour if you really want to. I mean, it really depends on where your budget is. And
for $10,000 an hour, man, I'll do some freaky fucking shit. So,
man, can you imagine if we had a $10,000 budget? Can you imagine the cool things that we would break on?
Fuck yes, we would. It'd be awesome, guys. Hook us up.
Anyway, patreon.com/DeEducated. Where else are we? We're on DeEducated.com, and you'll also find us on YouTube, the DeEducated podcast. If you're watching this right now, you're probably found us on YouTube. And we want to hear from you guys any which way but loose. Comment on YouTube, comment on our Facebook pages, comment on Patreon, comment on, if your app allows you to comment on the podcast, then comment on the podcast. Follow us on our blogs on our website if you're hard up for content and once a week long form podcast isn't enough for you. We do audio versions of our blogs. We basically read them to you. You can find those on our audio version of our podcast. So you'll find them when you look up the audio version of the full-length podcast as well. And thanks for joining us. And we're just going to keep on doing all this shit until nobody's listening. But that ain't going to happen because last week we had 2 listeners.
We've got to get at least 2.5 now.
We have 30. I
With
think it's
30
29
listeners.
or 30.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Thank you to all 30 of you. That's like, we're not even breaking social distancing rules at 30. So, boom. We can set up a couple of mini leagues, play some soccer or football or some shit.
Yeah, we can have 50 people in Saskatchewan for a mini league.
We're good to go.
According to the government.
Awesome. Well, because they know.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll see you all next time. Take it easy. Live wrong and perspire.
Love you all. Bye.
Bye.
In case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.